When people talk about Bang Xiao and HYBE's IPO controversy today, they often forget what things actually felt like back then. That's because of something called hindsight bias, the way events seem obvious and inevitable only after they have already happened. And from where we stand now, BTS global success and HYBE's debut on the stock market, also known as IPO, look like a straight, unstoppable trajectory. But in reality, nothing was guaranteed. According to reports released by deal site articles, at the time, in reality, even inside HYBE, there were doubts about whether BTS' next album would be a breakthrough around 2019. And the global market at the time was also unpredictable, and military enlistment deadlines loomed, and the company's future depended on keeping investor trust alive. And in those years, before BTS conquered stadiums around the world, there was another figure whose decisions would help determine whether HYBE survived long enough to get there. And his name was Kim Joong-dong. Okay, and this guy has been singled out the Financial Services Commission (FSC) as a personal acquaintance of Bang Xiao, who made tons of money thanks to HYBE stock IPO. Now, deal site articles point out that accusation is not really fair if you really look at what was going on at the time. Okay, in 2011. Kim Joong-dong was already known in capital markets as an expert in cultural content investment. He had studied engineering at Georgia Tech and UCLA, worked as a fund manager at Loan, which is one of the content distribution companies in Korea, and led investments at KB Investments before joining SV Investments. And that year, he came across Big Hits Entertainment, which was a small, struggling agency preparing to debut a boy group, BTS. And they had no hit songs, no headline tours, and no guarantee of survival in an industry dominated by bigger names, SM, YG, JYP. But Kim Joong-dong saw something in the company's production capabilities and in the growing global appetite for Korean pop culture. According to this news report from 2018, which was an interview piece with Kim Joong-dong, he said this in response to the question. Wasn't it Bang Xiao who first approached you for investment? He said, I actually went to him first. Back then, it was just a small new agency. Before joining SV Investment, I worked at Loan, a music content production and distribution company, as the head of strategic planning. In the industry, the name Bang Xiao was already well known. I'm not sure if I should say this, but he had a reputation for having top-tier producing skills and also for paying back money on time. That was interesting. You see, he said, investment in this sector are often essentially production cost advances, a kind of debt. Many times, companies would come back asking for more funds before fully repaying what they owed. But Bang Xiao was known for paying everything back, even if there were shortages. So when I was thinking about which agency to invest in, he was the one who came to mind. Of course, at the time, I had only heard his name. I had never actually met him. Question. So in the end, you invested because you trusted the person. Kim Joong-dong said. This was before BTS debut, when the current members were still trainees. Before investing, I did thorough background checks. They were already famous among trainees. I asked people who had worked with Bang Xiao. I asked distributors, and I even checked with trainees from other companies. Personally, I have always respected producers and people in that line of work, and I enjoy building relationships with them. I knew some parents of trainees from other agencies. I would say things like, let's meet your son, or let's have a call with your daughter, just to find out more about the trainees Bang Xiao was training. The company system for nurturing choreographers and composers was also different, he said. They didn't bring in big name stars and run projects like short-term real estate developments. Instead, they brought in people with potential and grew alongside them. I thought that was the company's real strength. Now, back to 2018-ish. Acting on that conviction, Kim Joong-dong invested 3 billion Korean won. That was 2011. Okay, so he invested 3 billion Korean won, which was Big Hit's first ever external funding. Now, the investment was supposed to buy time for BTS debut. Instead, by the following year, the money was gone. What was the cause? It was a scandal involving GLAM, which was a girl group that debuted before BTS under Big Hit. Now, when a member of GLAM became entangled in a high-profile scandal case with actor Lee Byung-hun, whom many of you would know as the host of Squid Game, the group collapsed, taking the project and the funds with it. Now, for most investors, that would have been the end. But Bang Si-hyuk reacted differently from the typical agency head who might disappear or make excuses. He went to SV Investments in person, their investor, explained the situation as an unforeseen accident, and asked for another 1 billion Korean won to keep the company alive. It was a quite bold move, and SV initially saw it as audacious. Think about it. That would have been really ridiculous. But after several internal meetings, they agreed on the verbal condition that if Big Hit recovered, they would be the first in line for repayment. And that extra funding paved the way for BTS debut in 2013. And let's check this article quote from the Deal Side article. That extra funding paved the way for BTS debut in 2013. An industry insider recalls, in the entertainment industry, unlike in the financial markets, it's often hard to guarantee trust in capital transactions. Bang Si-hyuk, alumnus of Gyeonggi High School and Seoul National University with experience at major agency JYP Entertainment, persuaded SV Investment that as long as he didn't lose credibility in the financial markets, he could eventually succeed in another project. That belief led to the additional investments. So, Bang Si-hyuk had such a huge conviction in the upcoming boy group that he was training. That was BTS. Now, Kim Joong-dong, who continued to believe in Bang Si-hyuk, is credited as a decisive voice in SV Investment's follow-up investment, according to the article. And their trust eventually turned SV's 4 billion won investment into a record-breaking return of over 100 billion won, which is a 27x gain. Okay, yet Kim Joong-dong now stands accused alongside Bang Si-hyuk of engaging in improper transactions through a private equity fund. Korean regulators claim that under Bang Si-hyuk's direction or cooperation, Eastone PE was established to buy out existing investors' shares before HYBE's IPO, yielding massive profits, with Kim Joong-dong's past contributions to HYBE dismissed under the label of personal acquaintance. Now, at the time, Eastone PE was acquiring shares from existing investors, but Kim Joong-dong no longer held an executive role at HYBE. From 2011 to May 2019, he has served as an outside director before stepping down, later continuing to advise HYBE's board as a major shareholder on intellectual property investments. Now, capital markets insiders argue that labeling Kim Joong-dong simply as Bang Si-hyuk's acquaintance is unfair, given his decade-long role in shaping HYBE's growth. Even in 2019, they say, HYBE's IPO prospects were uncertain, and replacing departing shareholders with new investors was no easy task, one industry figure said. Kim Joong-dong's contribution in the process makes it unjust to frame him as an unfair trader. Now, nevertheless, Kim had gone from investor to trusted ally. And that bond would matter later, again, when HYBE faced a different kind of challenge, which was keeping its internal stability during the run-up to its IPO. By mid-2019, BTS was riding high, but HYBE wasn't as stable as it looked from the outside. Inside the company, one of its most important shareholders, who was a co-founder and vice president, Choi decided to sell her entire stake. And that was a problem because finding someone willing to buy such a large chunk of HYBE at its by then already high valuation was difficult. And if the sale dragged on, it could send a dangerous message to the market that even HYBE's own leaders didn't believe in its future. And this is where Kim Joong-dong came back into the picture. He introduced Choi vice president, and Bang Xiu to someone called Yang Jun-sung, who was a former securities executive who had just founded Eastone Private Equity. Now, Eastone PE had two funds, Fund number 1 and Fund number 2, and they originally had same terms. One, a putback option, which is a clause ensuring investor capital protection if the IPO failed. And two, an earnout clause returning profits to Bang Xiu. And among these two funds, Fund number 1 was meant to help a departing co-founder liquidate her stake, Choi-Yoojung, okay? Essentially a special situation fund. And finding investors was hard. Why? Because BTS looming military enlistments and the uncertainty of a pandemic, COVID pandemic, made a successful IPO far from guaranteed. Now, to make the deal attractive, Kim Joong-dong proposed removing a profit-sharing clause that would have benefited Bang Xiu, making the deal more appealing to investors. And by the way, that earnout clause itself was suggested by the fund managers themselves, or equity funds, not Bang Xiu himself. And that investor-friendly structure, without that profit-sharing clause, worked. And Fund number 1 successfully raised 25 billion won and acquired Vice President Choi-Yoojung's entire shares. Now, Bang Xiu had his reasons for helping Choi-Yoojung cash out, the article says, even at his own disadvantage. After stake investment bought shares at 30,000 won per share, unease spread among executives, and Bang Xiu focused on quelling that unrest behind the scenes while publicly preparing for BTS' next album. Now, the question the article asked was this. So what gave Bang Xiu the confidence to offer put-back guarantees on over 230 billion won in share funds, from stake in October 2018 to Eastone Fund number 1 in June 2019 and Fund number 2 in November 2019? Likely, the answer says the article, it was his conviction in BTS' upcoming album and its success, even when others doubted. And by 2019, everything had changed. In April 2019, BTS released Map of the Soul Persona, featuring Boy With Love as one of the tracks. The album debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and topped charts in Korea and Japan, and his music video shattered YouTube's 24-hour view record with 74.7 million views. And from May to October, BTS embarked on a massive stadium tour across the US, Latin America, Europe, and Asia, playing to more than 1 million fans in 20 cities. Even the UK, which is famously reserved about foreign pop acts, welcomed BTS to Wembley Stadium, which is a stage shared only by music legends like the Beatles and Queen. So the world now saw BTS as more than a K-pop group. They were a global cultural force. And with that, HYBE's position in the market was transformed. In November 2019, Eastone launched Fund number 2, which was a far larger 105 billion won vehicle, with the profit-sharing clause for Si-hyuk. Critics now say that this shows favoritism, but insiders argue that comparing it to Fund Number 1 misses the context. Again, Fund Number 1 was a high-risk, special situation fund created when investor confidence was fragile. And it was created to help a leader, Kim Joong-dong, vice president, liquidate her entire stake. Fund Number 2, on the other hand, was built after BTS dominance was undeniable, when investors were competing to get in. And by then, HYBE didn't need to relax terms to attract capital. It was in a position to dictate them. Now, to regulators, Kim Joong-dong is simply a personal acquaintance of Si-hyuk, deal side articles argue. To those who now know HYBE's history, he is the investor who bet on BTS before anyone else. And he was a strategist who shaped its label expansion and the deal maker who found funding when no one else could. The irony is that the same deals that helped HYBE survive and grow into a global powerhouse are now the focus of legal challenges. Again, in 2011, Kim Joong-dong saw something the world hadn't even noticed. And in 2019, Si-hyuk believed in an album that the market wasn't sure about. And in 2020, HYBE emerged. Not just, now HYBE is the home of BTS, but now it's also a global entertainment company built on decisions that could have gone very differently. And that's the thing about hindsight bias. Once the ending is written, it's easy to forget how uncertain every step felt along the way. So, what do you guys now think? Now you have heard the entire story. Would you have personally guaranteed tens of billions of won, knowing your company's only superstar act might be sidelined by military service? Or would you have played it safe and waited? And if you were standing in Si-hyuk's shoes in mid-2019, with uncertainty in every direction, would you have made the same bets? And now, with everything we know, the world tour, the record-breaking albums, the IPO, do these deals look like, brilliant foresight or something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let me know what you think of this history behind HYBE's IPO. All right? And when you comment, as always, let's stay positive, respectful, and classy. Peace and love. Bye-bye.